Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nohet Tudimochi, and I'm the Executive Director of Resonate. And it is my pleasure to welcome you all to this webinar this afternoon about leadership and economic development, and more specifically, how leadership and soft skills impact psychosocial and economic outcomes for women in Rwanda. It is absolutely a pleasure seeing some of the names in the chat, partners, friends, but we'll keep going to make sure that we stay within the allocated time. The reason we're here today is because at Resonate, we have conducted a year-long randomized control trial, or an RCT, and it was an extraordinary learning experience for us at Resonate, but also for our partners in learning. I see that I'm breaking, so I'll take off my camera for now, and hopefully that will help. As I was saying, at Resonate, we've conducted a year-long RCT, and it was a great learning experience for us as an organization, but also for our partners in learning who are with me on this webinar today. And I look forward to introducing you to them very shortly. Bear with me 1 second. Sorry, I'm having a bit of a technical issue, but I'll keep going and hopefully you can still hear me. Thank you really for joining us. We'll start by going over the agenda, which you should see on your screens. And we'll start with a short overview of why at Resonate we made the decision to conduct an RCT a couple of years ago. And partnered with CARE International in Rwanda and researchers at Georgetown University and UC Berkeley to implement it. Next, I'll invite Rachel Nuwajira, who's the impact measurement team leader at CARE Rwanda, to share about why CARE also thought it was important to join us on this study and to invest time and resources in it. We'll also go over some key steps that we had to follow to get the RCT off the ground and to complete it in time, in spite of the COVID-19 pandemic starting right in the middle of it. Then we'll go straight to the findings of the RCT, and they will be presented by the lead researcher, Megan Lang, who's a postdoctoral scholar at King Climate Action Initiative in Santa Barbara in the US. And lastly, we'll end with a Q&A session. So you all have time to ask questions from any of the presenters. We have learned a lot from others along the way on our journey to measure impact. So we feel it's important to share our own learnings and hopefully help some of you in your own program improvement and impact measurement work. Our goal is to end the session around 4:15 this afternoon, but we'll be happy to stay on the line a bit longer until 4:30 if there's still some questions or comments that we'd like to address. So with no further ado, I'll kick things off with one quick question, which is, why did Resonate conduct an RCT? And a bit of context for some of you who are a bit less familiar with the work that Resonate does. We believe in gender equality, and for us that means equal access to opportunities between men and women. However, a big barrier to equal access to opportunity is the confidence gap. And what that means is that men are generally more self-assured or self-confident than women because of the social norms that we grow up around that often undermine our roles. And as a result of that confidence gap, we as women miss out on opportunities for social and economic advancement. Not only because we don't believe we deserve them or that we're truly capable of tackling them. And this problem certainly impacts women in vulnerable communities with low income and low education level. So what we realize is that as long as organizations that serve women in Rwanda and in East Africa deliver programs that focus only on hard skills and education, they're essentially leaving impact on the table. And our solution at Resonate was to develop confidence building leadership workshops and soft skills programs that can shift the mindsets of women and girls so they can see themselves as leaders who are capable of creating the changes they want to see in their lives, in their communities. And the way we do it is by partnering with organizations that provide hard skills or education, and we integrate our workshops into their existing programming to ensure that women and girls don't just have access to hard skills, but they also have the self-confidence and the practical tools to really turn opportunities into action. And from the very beginning of our work, we were committed to measuring our impacts. And we did so through different quantitative and qualitative approaches over time, surveying participants who went through our programs. And we've seen them take on leadership roles in their communities. We've seen them start businesses, advance academically, professionally, and we were able to track this data. But we also quickly learned that measuring the increase in the self-confidence and the leadership is not as straightforward. And some of you here on the call who are measuring soft indicators like leadership, resilience, or personal transformation, I'm sure you can relate to this challenge. So, because sometimes you can see or you can sense the personal transformation that has happened in a woman who's gone through one of your programs. I can think of a young woman called Emilienne who went through one of our leadership trainings in Gahanga. And she started doing amazing things. She went from being like a really shy girl living with her parents and her siblings to starting her own business from home. She started paying for the school fees of her siblings. She started providing for herself, like buying her own clothes. And we invited her to come as a speaker and talk to a group of visitors that we were hosting at Resonate. And I remember standing next to Emilienne and just like the way she stood tall and felt confident and proud, like I could just sense it standing next to her. And that's what I like to call the magic of the work that Resonate does when I talk to some of you. But measuring it is very difficult in numbers, and measuring the trickling impact of that personal transformation can get even trickier. But we surely remained committed to finding an accurate way to measure it as best as we could, because we believe that elements of self-confidence and leadership are really critical tools for development in all women's empowerment programs. And that's how came an amazing opportunity to conduct a pilot RCT with UC Berkeley in 2016 that led to a full RCT in 2019 to measure the impact of our core programs. And we're very, very excited to be here with you today now sharing the results of this study. Before we go on more about the RCT, I wanted to invite Rachel Nwajira to present on behalf of CARE International in Rwanda why they wanted to join us on this journey. Rachel is the impact measurement team leader at CARE Rwanda, and she's responsible for designing and overseeing implementation of effective systems for impact measurement, knowledge management, and internal accountability across all of CARE Rwanda's programs and projects. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you, Norit. Good afternoon, everyone. Excuse me, I have a bit of cough. So if I'm not clear, bear with me. I will share my screen. As Norit said, I'm in charge of impact measurement at CARE Rwanda. And part of my role involves dissemination and sharing of our results to the wider audience. So I'll talk about a little bit about CARE. This is my presentation today. For now, I'm going to focus on why CARE got involved in the RCT. And then the others, I'll talk about them later. But before I go there, I wanted to let you know a little bit about CARE. At CARE, we are currently developing a strategy for 2030, and we'll be focusing on the 6 pillars. As you can see them here: gender equality, right to food, right to health, humanitarian assistance, women economic justice, and climate justice. And the work we did with the Resonate mainly falls under women economic justice and gender equality. So I can share the presentation and read more about the pillars that we'll be looking at, but those are our pillars that we'll be focusing on up to 2030. So why did we get involved in the RCT? I think the next presenter, for those of you who don't know what Randomized Control Trial mean, the next presenter will explain what that is. But before we did the RCT, we worked with Resonate in 2 of our projects to implement their program, which is called Storytelling for Leadership. And I'm sure Noret will also explain more about what that is. But after seeing, we saw amazing results from that work involved in it. But most importantly, we had different models for leadership training, but we didn't have a tested model. So we got involved so that we are able to test this model and know, does this model really work? And so we decided to get involved in the RCT. But also, because I'd been working with them and they had showed us this amazing tool, we said, really their model works for us to be able to do future partnerships. So those mainly are the 3 reasons why we did get involved in the RCT. Then, Nora, do you want me to talk about the program we're giving our women, or that would be later?
No, go ahead. Feel free to share that as well. But Rachel, you're breaking up a bit. Your voice is breaking. I wonder if you could turn off your camera for a minute, because it may improve your connection.
Sure. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. So the program that we did with them, where we implemented the Storytelling for Leadership, is a literacy training program for VSL members, mainly those whose literacy levels are very low, and we're training them about numeracy and literacy skills. Numeracy around additions, writing your names, simple reading for women, because without them having those literacy levels, they're not able to meaningfully participate in the voluntary savings and loan associations, which is a model that CARE uses for all its work that it does. And so was one of the complementary trainings that we gave them, empowerment trainings that we gave them. But why is that women are able to understand what leadership is, and they're able to increase their confidence, and also understand the power of storytelling, so increase their comfort in public speaking, and
Hi, Rachel, can you hear us? I wasn't sure for a second if it was oh, we lost her, unfortunately. Apologies, I think her internet is a bit unstable. She was sharing about some of the programming that the participants at CARE had gone through their financial and adult a financial adult literacy and numeracy program, and also some of the other skills that they also wanted, that they use in the care model. It looks like Rachel is back. I think I'll ask for your patience. I feel like we've all gotten better at being patient with the internet nowadays. Rachel, can you hear us?
Did you lose me?
Yes, we did, unfortunately. You were you started really breaking up when you were going over the VSL model and the skills that CARE was giving to the women who participated, or had given the women who participated in the RCT. Would you like to speak to them quickly or repeat it?
Okay, I can resonate. We had a literacy program training around basic numeracy and literacy skills for illiterate VSL members. The reason we were doing that is that they're able to have a meaningful participation during their activities, but also to increase their confidence. And so that's how Resonate came in to offer the leadership trainings, that is leadership for storytelling program, so that we are able to increase confidence of the women, they're able to identify their personal strength, but also increase comfort in public speaking. Yeah, over to you, Norette.
Thank you so much for sharing this important background. All right, next I will invite Claire to share with us an overview of the process that we followed to practically get the RCT off the ground with our partners and to complete it on time, as I said, in spite of the pandemic that started right in the middle of it. Claire Huineza is the country director of Resonate. She leads Resonate's operations here in Rwanda, including team management, financial planning, and impact measurements. She holds an MBA from Oklahoma Christian University and a certificate in social enterprise management and impact investing from Monterey University. Monterey Institute of International Studies. And she has an incredible range of experience from project management, finance, program monitoring, and evaluation. Claire, a pleasure inviting you to speak.
Thank you, Norette, for the introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to see you all. We have a big number of people. Some of them are our partners, some are new. So it's a pleasure to see you all. As Norette said, I'm going to share a bit of overview, or like a brief summary of what we did to make sure that the RCT was successful, and that we collected accurate information that was going to help us get the data or the information that we needed. To start, I'll talk about how many people we engaged with. So we surveyed 456 women who have participated in Care International Rwanda program. And these are the women who are based in Nyaruguru district, more specifically in Chahinda and Nyagisozi sector. And Megan will talk more about how we group these women into the 3 groups. But for those women who participated in the treatment group, which is the group that received the 2 different training that Resonate offer. So the first group received Storytelling for Leadership, which is our core program. The Storytelling for Leadership is aiming at building the confidence, but also the leadership ability. And when we say leadership, we don't only mean the formal leadership that people hold, you're elected or you lead a group of people. By leadership, we mean you are proactive in the face of a challenge. There's a problem in your community, there is a problem at home or at your work. You're the first one to find a solution. You don't wait on someone to come and solve the problem. And that's the mindset that we want our participants to have, so that they shift their mindset to start seeing themselves as agents of change, as problem solvers, but also as leaders. And for the second group of the treatment group, they received our professional development module, which is goal setting. How do you set a SMART goal versus the difference between setting a SMART goal versus just a goal. Also effective communication, because we know that communication is a key. Once you miss anything during the information sharing, also it can affect the result that you're looking for. Also, we provided a third module, which is seeking out opportunity. Now that you know what you want to achieve, now that you know that your goal, how do you network? How do you reach out to people who can help you achieve your goals? So cash and
can you, not sure if you can hear Claire.
I started the baseline August and September of 2022 to do that. I can hear you. Can you hear me? I can hear you. Oh, okay. Can you hear me now? Okay, right. Yes. So we had to skip the midline, but then we were able to do the end line in October 2020. The partners who was involved in this research, of course, it was the Resonate M&E team, mainly for the coordination part, but also the Care M&E team, as well as the researchers from the UC Berkeley. That was Megan Lang, and from Georgetown University, we had Dr. Kathleen and Dr. Edward. And Georgetown was the funder of this RCT project. As for us to make sure that this RCT, to make sure that it goes smoothly and that we were able to run it properly. So we had to engage with the National Institute of Statistics, Rwanda, to make sure that we have the permission to conduct the research. Also, we had to make sure that we have the right tool to use. That included the survey and making sure that they're translated into the local language, which is Kinyarwanda, and make sure that they're understandable and clear to the participant. In addition to that, we had to recruit and train enumerators. We hired a big number of enumerators because we wanted to use the same enumerators throughout the study and train them on different subjects such as human subject research ethics, data security, and for them to practice actually collecting data. In this practice, it was very useful because we used the Rwandan people. So during the practice, we were able to see, okay, this survey, this question makes sense. This one might be hard for participants to understand. So we had to adjust survey until we had the final survey that was clear and on point. Also, we had to inform the local leadership in Nyaruguru district, as well as in Nyagisozi sector. And we had to set a different time interview slot for participants because we couldn't survey all the 456 women at once. So we had to give them different appointment, but also to manage to make sure there is no duplication or in terms of the data collected. As for the implementation, the researchers had already put participants into 3 groups. They did it randomly, and Megan will talk more about that. And each participant had a unique ID. And the unique ID was to help us make sure that the information we are collecting align with the person. Also, before starting the RCT or the survey, we had to meet with the women, explain to them who we were, because it was their first time to interact with women, women from Resonate. and tell them more about the research that we are doing. But also it was an opportunity for them to ask any question that they had, but also for us to clarify that it's their right to participate in the research, and that if they choose to withdraw from the research, it won't affect their relationship with care. So we wanted to respect their right to choose to participate or not participate in the study. But well enough, all of them accepted to participate. So then they had to sign a consent form accepting to be part of the research. And then we started the interview process. It was very helpful to have care staff on the field to manage participants and avoid people who would come twice to be interviewed. So because they were already familiar with them, so they helped us in the coordination on the field. Also using the same enumerators throughout the year of the study was very beneficial to us, because we knew that we asked the question the same way we asked them in the baseline as well as in the follow-up. So that's what we did in terms of making sure that the randomized control trial goes smoothly and that we're able to collect accurate information. I'll pause here and I'm done speaking. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claire. And to all of our guests, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat section of the webinar, and we'll address them when we, after the presentation of the results. We'll make sure we address them. And if you're writing a question to a specific presenter, please also note that so we know who you're asking the question to. All right, so now it's time to share the results of this RCT, and it's my pleasure to invite Megan to start the presentation. Megan Lang is a postdoctoral scholar from King Climate Action Initiative in Santa Barbara in the US. Her research spans a range of topics in development economics, including energy access, women-owned enterprises, and psychology and economics. Welcome, Megan.
Great, thank you, Narette, and thank you everyone for being here today. I'll go ahead and share my screen and hopefully get started. Okay, great. So let me know if I'm ever breaking up or if you can't see my screen for any reason. But I am very excited to be able to share the results from the Resonate RCT. And as Claire and Narette have already mentioned, this was joint work with Edward Soule and Catherine Tinsley, who are both at Georgetown University. All right, so to briefly introduce the study, I think this is probably clear by now, but the research question that we had in mind when we started is that we wanted to know what the impact is of Resonate's storytelling for leadership and professional development workshops on psychosocial and economic outcomes for women in Rwanda. So when we're thinking about psychosocial outcomes, that's just kind of like a broad term, and we're trying to think about things like attitudes about yourself, connections to other people in your community, as well as your mental well-being. Then when we think about economic outcomes, this is probably more intuitive, but we're thinking about things like income and work and things like that. Now, we answered this question using a randomized control trial, and we keep talking about that. And so I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about what an RCT is and why we decided to run one. For those of you who are already familiar, hopefully you can bear with me for just a couple minutes while I go through the intuition behind an RCT. So first, I just kind of like to break down randomized control trial word by word and talk about what it means. The first word, randomized, means that we're going to randomly assign participants to study groups. And the reason that we want to do that is that random assignment ensures that on average, all of our study groups are similar at the beginning of the study. Now, that turns out to be important because of the second part of an RCT, which is the control. So here, the idea is that we want to know what would have happened in this case if we had never actually run Resonate's workshops with these participants. So the way to think about this is that we need a group to compare the workshop participants to see what would have happened if we had never showed up, right? And that's going to be the control group, and that's why we call this a randomized control trial. And the trial part just means that we didn't already know the precise impact of Resonate's work. Of course, if we had already known what Resonate's impact was, we never would have had to test this out. So I think that a short visual example can be really helpful here. So this is what we might have seen if we had not done a randomized control trial, and instead we had just measured some outcomes pre and post. So this is just an example. You'll see it doesn't have any actual numbers on it yet. But for example, if we were to look at the % of participants who report speaking up, we would see maybe some number reporting that they speak up before storytelling for leadership. And then we could go back, say, a year later and see how many reports speaking up after storytelling for leadership. Now, if we do that, we might see something like this. And that could be a little bit concerning because if you compare the number before and after, it looks like Resonate's impact might actually be 0 or even negative, right? And so a randomized control trial is going to help us better understand because we're going to have a control group. So instead of just doing a before and after, what we're going to do is to introduce this control group. So now the dark orange bar are the people who are going to take part in storytelling for leadership, and the light orange bar are the people who are not. So those are going to be our control group. Now what you'll see is that in this example, as you would expect because of random assignment, before storytelling for leadership, the % of participants speaking up looks about the same in both of these groups. And then we go back a year later after storytelling for leadership, and we see that actually the % of participants speaking up has gone down for both groups, but it's gone down much more for the control group. And so what that means is that by comparing the storytelling for leadership group to the control group, we actually have a true measure of Resonate's impact, right? And you'll actually see this happen in a lot of our outcomes today because we see that COVID negatively impacted many of the women in our sample. And so some of the outcomes do look worse overall when we go back a year later, but we see that the women who participated in storytelling for leadership and professional development have been able to weather those changes better than women in the control group. And that's what allows us to really understand Resonate's impact through the comparison to the control group. All right, so to get into the details of our particular study, Claire has already done a great job introducing the women in our sample. The only thing that I'm going to add is just a little bit of context to kind of help you envision who these women are. So they range in age from 23 to 75. The median age is around 40. And what we see is that the vast majority of them, 88%, report that their primary occupation is working on their family farms. All right, and so the study design here is fairly straightforward. What we do is we randomly assign participants to storytelling for leadership, professional development, or CASH, right? And so CASH is going to be a somewhat unusual choice here, and I think it's worth understanding why we did this. So instead of using a pure control group where we do nothing, what we want to think about is that whatever funds we use for Resonate's workshop could be used for something else. And so what we want to do is compare to an alternative use for the workshop funds rather than doing nothing. Now, just giving cash to participants is something that other people have done in the past, and so that's a useful benchmark to compare to other programs as well. But the important thing to know is that when we're showing you Resonate's impact relative to this cash control group, that's a higher bar for Resonate to meet in terms of its program impact than just comparing to doing nothing. Right? And so everything that you're seeing is not just saying Resonate is better than doing nothing additional, it's saying that it's actually better than just giving this money to participants to do with what they would like. All right, so before I get into the actual results, I'm just going to spend a moment introducing kind of the way that I'll be presenting the results. So as I've previewed before, the measure of impact that I'm going to talk about is the difference in follow-up outcomes between groups, controlling for baseline levels of those outcomes for each woman. So again, kind of going back to the example that I gave you before, when we go back for the follow-up in November of 2020, we're going to be looking at the difference in those follow-up outcomes between storytelling for leadership, professional development, and our cash control group. The other thing that I'll be talking about a lot is statistical significance. Again, some of you may be familiar with this. For those who are less familiar, the intuition behind statistical significance is that all of our measures have some uncertainty in them. And so when we test an impact for statistical significance, it's just telling us when we can be fully confident that that impact is actually larger than 0. What that looks like in practice is something like the following. So this is the type of chart that I'll show you a lot of different versions of for different outcomes. And I'm just going to walk you briefly through how to read this chart. So on the vertical axis here, you have the outcome in question. Just as an example, this is the likelihood of holding a formal leadership position. And then on the horizontal axis, we have the different workshop groups. So we have cash, our control group, we have professional development, and then we have storytelling for leadership. Now the orange bar is going to be the baseline level of the outcome. So in this case, the baseline level of holding a leadership position. And the blue bar is the follow-up level. Now you'll see that there are these little black bars that overlay the orange and the blue. And those are what are called confidence intervals. So the way to think about the confidence intervals is it's telling us about statistical significance. And so when there is overlap between these black bars, like there is here between cash and professional development at baseline, that tells us that there is not a statistically significant difference between the two groups, right? So seeing that there's no difference between cash and professional development at baseline is exactly what we would expect because of randomization. On the other hand, when there is no overlap between the black bars, that tells us that there is a statistically significant difference. So in this case, just as an example, you can see that in storytelling for leadership, follow-up levels are statistically lower than baseline levels. And so again, what we're going to be looking at here is differences between the blue bars, the follow-up outcomes between groups. So we're going to be trying to look and see whether we see very much overlap in these black bars in the follow-up outcomes. Okay, great. So now that I've introduced the methodology, I can go ahead and dive into the actual results. And I'm going to start with storytelling for leadership, and then I'll move on to professional development. And the one thing that I'll say is that we actually measured even more than what I'm showing you today. And I'd be happy to talk more about that in the Q&A. But in the interest of time, I'm going to kind of highlight some of our main findings and dig into those a little bit more. All right, so the first outcome that I'd like to show you is self-value. And the way that we measured self-value is by combining a couple different survey questions. And so on a 4-point scale, where 1 was not at all true and 5, or rather 4 was very true, we asked participants to rate the following 2 statements, which were "I matter" and "there are good things about me." So very simple questions. Now, what we see here is that storytelling for leadership participants at follow-up have scores that are about 7.5% higher than the cash control group on average, right? And that is a statistically significant difference. It's a little bit hard to see because this figure is a little bit small, so I apologize for that. Now, related to self-value are our findings on something that's called subjective social status. And so this is a well-validated measure that's actually been used in many different contexts. And the way that this works is that we show participants a ladder. The ladder has 10 rungs or 10 steps on it. And we tell people to think about all of the reasons that people hold social status in their community, right? It could be income, it could be education, it could be the work that they do in their community. And then we ask them to place themselves on that ladder. Today, we ask them to place themselves and tell us where they thought they were 5 years in the past and where they think they're going to be 5 years in the future. So in the top chart, what you can see is that storytelling for leadership participants have significantly higher evaluations of their own social status at present than cash or professional development. But the thing that's really interesting is that in addition to that, on the bottom chart, you can see that at follow-up, people who participated in Storytelling for Leadership have also updated their evaluation of their social status 5 years ago. So going through Storytelling for Leadership isn't just helping them feel better about their current position in their community, they're actually looking back and updating. I apologize, the lights have turned off here. There we go. So they're also updating their past evaluation and saying that actually they had a higher social status in their community in the past than they had realized before. So I think this is an incredibly impactful finding. And as you can see, especially the past social status is just much, much higher than what we see in cash or professional development. All right, so moving on, we also have a measure here, which tries to measure how closely participants identify as being a leader. And what we see here is that Storytelling for Leadership participants have scores that are 31% higher than the cash control group. And we do also see some impact from professional development. So people who were in professional development also have scores that are about 20% higher than the cash control group as well. So what we see is that Storytelling for Leadership is certainly helping people see themselves as a leader. And then we'd like to think about kind of how that manifests in their actual behavior. And so this is one of the results that we really like to talk about. Here we have a measure of what we're just calling speaking up. And the question that we asked to get at this measure is, in the last 2 weeks, have you spoken up in a group situation where you did not know everyone present? And so what you'll see here is that certainly levels are lower at follow-up kind of across the board, because as we all know, there are just fewer group situations post-COVID than there were before. But again, this is why it's going to be really important for us to have a control group. So what we see is that women who participated in Storytelling for Leadership are actually 67% more likely to speak up than women in the cash control group, and actually 57% more likely to speak up than women in professional development. The other thing that's really nice about this result is that we didn't just ask the yes/no question, did you speak up? If they said yes, we asked where they were speaking up. And so what we see is that women who report speaking up are doing it in markets, particularly around COVID enforcement, enforcing new rules and regulations and trying to keep everyone safe. We see it happening in family and neighbor dispute resolution. And we also see it happening when new members are coming to their savings groups. And so just a lot of examples here of kind of the day-to-day peer leadership that we hope that Storytelling for Leadership is encouraging. So to briefly recap, what we see is that Storytelling for Leadership has positive and persistent impacts on a range of psychosocial outcomes. And now I'll go ahead and move on to talk about the impacts of professional development. So in professional development, we see outcomes in slightly different areas. And in particular, we see impacts on more economic outcomes. So here we ask participants how much income they earned over the previous month from all sources. And we record anyone who didn't earn any income as a 0 here. And so something that's just methodologically important to note here is that we're not just asking participants to do this themselves. We actually have the enumerators kind of walk through this with them and help them add it up to try to get the most accurate measure of income that we can. And what we actually see here is that, again, even though COVID appears to have had pretty severe economic impacts for these women, women in professional development are earning over 100% more income than the cash control group on average. Now, one of the reasons for that is that we just see that women in professional development are more likely to be participating in any sort of income generating activity at all. So professional development participants are about 12% more likely to be engaging in any type of income generation than the cash control group on average. Now, the final thing that I'll show for professional development is a result on achieving goals. So this is a slightly different measure. And the way that we did this is that during the baseline survey, we asked every woman to tell us if they had a goal, and if so, what that goal was. And then when we went back for the follow-up survey, we actually asked each woman if she had achieved that specific goal that she had told us about at baseline. And so when we do that, what we see is that women in professional development are actually 31% more likely to have achieved the goal that they decided for themselves than women in the cash control group. So to recap what we see for professional development, we see relatively few impacts on these psychosocial outcomes, but it does appear to be effective at helping participants to achieve their goals, and achieving those goals seems to have real and meaningful economic impacts as well. All right, and then in the last couple of minutes that I have, I'd just like to touch briefly on some differential impacts by age. And so just to give a little bit of motivation for this, so far, everything that I've showed you is just talking about the impact of these workshops on average. But we also wanted to think about whether there were particular types of participants that might be benefiting the most from each workshop. And the reason we decided to focus on age is because it's really unclear which direction this might go. So we know that younger women may face higher internal barriers in terms of low self-esteem or a low sense of agency. And that could mean that these workshops are particularly effective for younger women. But we also know that younger women may face greater external barriers, and so it may be harder for them to kind of operationalize what they're learning from these workshops. And so what we'll do in the following figures are just looking at only the follow-up outcomes, and we'll break it out by women who are over versus under 40 at the time of the workshop. And again, I won't be showing you every single outcome, but I'll just pick a few where we see some differences. And so here, what we see for subjective social status is that women under 40 in storytelling for leadership have larger increases relative to the cash control group than women who are over 40. And we see similar patterns in a number of other psychosocial outcomes. Unfortunately, very few of them are statistically significant, but we see a lot kind of going in the same direction. On the other hand, when we look at achieving goals, we actually see something that's pretty striking. So in storytelling for leadership here on the right, we see that women under 40 are the ones who are the most likely to achieve their goals after storytelling for leadership. But then when we look at professional development, we see that the women over 40, so this dark blue bar, are actually more likely to achieve their goals from professional development, right? And so that's just kind of interesting and speaks to the fact that these two workshops might be kind of targeting slightly different populations. All right, so at this point, we'll just briefly wrap up. And so what we see overall is that storytelling for leadership and professional development are both highly effective workshops, but the thing that we discovered is that their impacts show up in different domains. And so for storytelling for leadership, we see very strong impacts on psychosocial outcomes and peer leadership. And we see that these impacts may be the largest for younger women, whereas in professional development, we see the strongest impacts on things like achieving goals and economic outcomes. And again, we see that these impacts appear to be driven a little bit more by older women. And so I'll go ahead and stop there. And I think Claire and Rachel are also going to talk a little bit about how they then use these results in their work.
Thank you so much, Megan. And you're absolutely right. I'll invite Claire to take the stage and share about what these results meant for us as Resonate and how they're going to inform the way forward for us. And Rachel will go next.
Thank you, Norette. Yes, this was really an aha moment for us as Resonate, as an organization, to actually see which program works and what can we learn from the results. One of the things that we learn is that delivering a hybrid model is very beneficial to our participant. And that means delivering storytelling for leadership in addition with the professional development. because with the storytelling for leadership, we saw an increase in psychosocial impact as well as peer leadership, as Megan shared with all of us. But also the professional development module is the one that also gives the participant now the tools and what they need to be able to achieve or even set the goals that they want to achieve in life. So going forward, I think for the people that we've been offering storytelling for leadership after the RCT, you've probably noticed that we now give storytelling in addition to goal setting. The second learning is that the storytelling is very beneficial to the young people. And we say, as I would say in our culture, so we want to start with the young people so that they grow up with that mindset, so that they take advantage of all the opportunities that are around them. So those are the two highlights or like big learning from this study. But also I would say that it was an aha moment for us because we get challenged to say, you're offering soft skills to people. People need money. People need the hard skills. But also this was a moment to say, okay, they need that. But if you give them the soft skills that they need, the impact could be higher. So that's what I could say as an organization, that what we've learned. Thank you. I'm done speaking.
Thank you so much, Claire. And now I'll invite Rachel to share about your learnings at CARE, having gone through the RCT with us, having seen the results. How has that informed your way forward at CARE?
Thank you. So at CARE, I will just talk through. At CARE, we learned that because we're looking for a tested model that really works, and the benefits that we saw among our beneficiaries, like the research has shown, it showed us that this model can work, and then we should take it forward among our trainings. And from there, we're able again to collaborate with Resonate to do more trainings. So after that RCT, we were able to engage Resonate again to do a training of one of our recently concluded projects of around 200, close to 220 women. So for us, it showed us that the model really can work, but it also showed us that it is good to partner with people that have successfully tested models into our programs, especially if you do not have those in-house capabilities, in-house qualities, that it's good to partner with the people that have tested models. And for us, that was a plus. But we are also looking forward to continue engaging Resonate in our future programs. Like I've said, they have showed us they have a tested model, because our beneficiaries were able to increase participation, increase confidence in public speaking, because that's what we are looking for. And for us, that is a plus for our programs. Thank you. Over to you, Norette.
Thank you so much, Rachel. All right, so we'll start with the Q&A session now. And hopefully you have lots of questions lined up for us. I already have a few in the Q&A chat box.
I think Norette dropped, So if there is anyone in the audience who has a question, feel free to raise your hand or type in the chat box your question, and then we'll respond to that.
I can also, I think there are a couple questions in the chat that I would be happy to talk about. Oh, I think Noretta's back though.
Yeah, the internet is not on my side today, but I shall prevail. So we'll keep things going. Yes, Megan, we can go to the Q&A. Which question would you like to tackle first?
I am looking, and I think that some of them you've answered in the chat, but I think one that you said we would get to in Q&A is from Isabel. So if professional development and storytelling for leadership trainings are addressing different skills, how can you tell which one has the greatest impact for women in the long term? The groups perform better compared to the cash group, but how do you compare between the two? So this is a great question. And so we actually, so in the same way that we compare each of these to the cash group, we can also compare them to each other. And what we actually see in general is that overall, storytelling for leadership does have higher impacts on some of the psychosocial outcomes, whereas professional development has higher impacts on some of the economic outcomes. Now, something you might have seen in the slides is that actually between storytelling for leadership and professional development, actually very few of those differences are statistically significant. So the sizes are a little bit different, but we actually, in many cases, can't say definitively that there is a bigger impact for storytelling for leadership relative to professional development. But we do have that precision when it comes to cash. So hopefully that answers a little bit. But yeah, overall, the pattern is kind of more on the economic side for professional development and more on the psychosocial side for storytelling for leadership.
Isabel, I hope that answered your question. Natalie, and if it didn't, please feel free to send a follow-up question. In the meantime, Natalie asked, can we spend a couple more minutes on the slide that shows women's likelihood to achieve their goals based on their age? Would you be able to pull up that slide again, Megan?
Yeah, give me one moment here.
Great.
Okay, so let me go back. Can everyone see this?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yes, so, and I apologize, I was going fast at this point. So I'll just talk through this briefly. The dark blue bars, so again, this is only looking at the follow-up outcomes, so 13 months after the workshop. The dark blue bars are the proportion of women completing their goals in each group who were over 40 at the time of the workshop. The light blue bar is the proportion for women who were under 40. And so again, what we're seeing here is in professional development, the women who are over 40 are more likely to achieve their goals, whereas in storytelling for leadership, the women who are under 40 are slightly more likely to achieve their goals. But I'd be happy to take any other questions about this as well.
Natalie, I hope that answered your question, and feel free to to ask a follow-up one. Donata, hi Donata. She had sent a question earlier asking, saying she's really keen to hear how we measured agency with this increase in self-confidence, which Megan sort of went over that in the slides where she talked about us measuring the increase in self-confidence. And is there anything you'd want to add to that, Megan, around this link between self-confidence and how that leads to women being proactive and basically having more agency.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit more to that. So I think there are kind of two parts to this. One is, how do women think about themselves and perceive themselves? And then the second is, how does that actually change how they behave in their communities? And so hopefully what I showed you on things like self-value and people's own evaluation of their social status, those are the measures that we use to get at this idea of self-confidence and kind of how do you view yourself. And then when we look at actual behaviors, like for instance, speaking up, or how closely you identify as being a leader, that's where we're really trying to get at this sense of agency and this sense that not only do you have more confidence in yourself, but that confidence is translating into actual actions that you're taking in your community and in your day-to-day life. And so that's kind of the two pieces there of like self-confidence, and then what do we actually see changing in terms of how these women are going out and being agents of change in their community.
Thank you very much. I see a question from Isabel, who's saying that her question was about, so she's saying you understand that the participants were randomly assigned, but you're curious about how they were recruited into the workshops. Isabel, are you referring to how CARE, because basically what happened is that we partnered with CARE on this RCT, and CARE is the one that identified women who had received hard skills and education, which is a compliment. That's what we complement as a model, because we bring in the self-confidence, the leadership, and the soft skills. So they went ahead and looked at groups of women who had gone through their program and selected 400. We're looking for 450 women, ended up with 456 women from different groups that had gone through the VSL, through the savings programs that they run. I hope that answers your question, but we can also ask Rachel to jump in and add to that. Rachel, is there anything you'd like to add on how you went about selecting the 450 women that we ended up working with through the RCT?
Okay, so the way we select the women to, okay, first of all, we have a program before the RCT came on board. So we usually target women that are in the first and second categories of body hair, but usually those who are not financially excluded. Financially included. Financial inclusion meaning people who are using formal financial services or non-formal financial services. And in this case, VSL is a non-formal financial service. And so we're targeting all those women to go into our program. So with the RCT, the Rosenet was given the mandate to choose who to be in what group and who to be in what group, but also looking at the other different capacity levels that the women had. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. And let us know if you have a follow-up question. I do see another question from Christine that says, starting with congratulations on the work done. Thank you so much. You're asking if we have a plan for the women under the control group. I may ask for you to clarify what you mean by a plan. If you're referring to like beyond the RCT, if we're going to work with the women who receive the cash. And you can, if you raise your hand, we can unmute you and you can take the mic. I want to make sure we're understanding your question properly. Let me see if we have more questions.
Maybe, Norit, as you answer, I wanted to answer a question on did participants receive any other programmatic intervention from CARE? Yes. So as I said, our program was mainly on literacy and numeracy for adult, that is adult function and numeracy program. Teaching rural women how to read and write. That was the major focus, but also these women were organized into voluntary saving groups where they are taught about financial literacy, but also they did receive trainings on GBV, trainings on economic empowerment. Yeah, those were the programmatic interventions that they got from CARE. And then the resonant leadership was a plus that we wanted to give them.
Thank you for tackling the question. Go ahead, Megan.
Yeah, and I'll just briefly add, because I think there's also a question about isolating the impacts of storytelling for leadership and professional development. And so just to be clear, all of the things that Rachel is describing are things that women in all three groups were benefiting from before. And so the randomization is only at the level of Resonate's programming in this case, which means that everything that we're showing you is the isolated impact of storytelling for leadership and professional development relative to the cash control group. Right, so this is kind of saying all of the women had benefited from all of CARE's programming already, and then we're trying to see the additional impact, as Rachel is saying, of having Resonate's content delivered as well.
Thank you, Megan, for adding to that. All right, I do see a question from Donata saying, a bit struggling with the term professional development for women who are primary school graduates and work on a farm. Perhaps work in this case is even unpaid. What type of professional development skills were given to them so that one is able to relate this to the shared impact? That is a fantastic question, Donata. And to be honest, I think I've realized that we need to do some renaming of our programs. When we originally started developing professional development programs, which are essentially soft skills programs, we had started working with groups that were a bit more educated, but we quickly realized that soft skills such as goal setting or how to network, how to seek out opportunities can be just as beneficial to women who work on farms, let's say, who studied up to primary school, as long as we adapted the content and the delivery to their level and to a way that really served them and that they understood. So we've progressively started referring to them as soft skills modules or soft skills training first, rather than say professional development, because it does add that context of, professional setting, somebody in an office here in Kigali. And that's like a transition we started making about how to speak about the professional development program and saying soft skills. So I'm glad you caught that. I understand that you caught that disconnect, but think of it as soft skills rather than professional development. This just happened to be how we were presenting the programs by the time we started the RCT. And we have a question from Muhoza saying, I was wondering if there was any consideration on breaking the impact based on specific and young age range. Megan, have you answered this one?
Sure.
I can't remember if we had already tackled it or not. I feel like saying under 40 has a huge gap in terms of interest. What a woman of 20 years finds interesting is different from what a woman of 40 finds interesting. Maybe we shall explore that more. Yes, that's a new question, a great one. Megan, do you mind taking it?
Yeah, so partially this just has to do with like the composition of our sample. And so 40 was just kind of a natural halfway point. And we're already a little bit limited just by our sample size and being able to test out different age cutoffs kind of for those comparisons. I will say that, separately, and something I didn't show today was just like trying to use different age cutoffs to see if it makes a very big difference. And we don't see too many differences kind of around there, but I think that what you're getting at is very true, that there are just kind of different areas of interest for women who are younger versus older, and that could certainly explain some of the differences that we see, and it could explain, why storytelling for leadership is maybe more appealing for younger women, whereas the goal setting and things like that in professional development are a little bit more interesting for women who are over 40. But yeah, apart from that, I can't speculate too much more about where those differences are coming from.
Thanks so much. We also have another great question here from Silas, our partner at Mijekov. Welcome, Silas. He's saying, wondering if you managed to measure resilience to COVID-19 for both the control and for both groups. I was also wondering if you're planning to carry out another RCT, and if yes, how many of them, and they will be separated by which period of time? You can give us more awareness of the long-term impact of the beneficiaries. I wonder if Megan or Claire could take the first part of the question about measuring resilience to COVID-19, and I can take the second part of the question about whether or not we would do a second or another RCT. And what I'm assuming Celeste is saying is, as we're trying to capture an increase in agency, if we were measuring some of it, if some of this resilience was in response to what was happening around COVID-19, which I don't believe we were able to do that, but I'll get back to Megan to answer the question.
Yeah, so we decided not to add any additional questions specifically about COVID-19 in our follow-up survey, just because our survey was also already pretty long. But what we do see, and this is only qualitative, I spoke to it a little bit, is in some of the responses where we gathered a little bit more qualitative information. So for instance, when we said okay, you're speaking up more, but where are you speaking up more? We heard people mentioning COVID there. In general, so again, the fact that we have the cash control group helps give us some idea of resilience. Again, it's all going to be relative to that cash control group, but I think just kind of some of what you saw in the graphs that I showed are showing things like economic impacts and other types of impacts from the lockdown. And so, we see that overall, a lot of these follow-up levels are lower than baseline levels. And I think COVID is a natural explanation for those things. And I think that it is probably accurate to interpret some of our results as resilience to COVID-19. Again, but that is only relative to the cash control group. And unfortunately, we can't necessarily see what the impact of the cash was relative to doing nothing, because again, we don't have a randomized group that's doing nothing. So I think that's a little bit of a limitation here. But Claire, I don't know if you have anything to add as well.
No, you said it beautifully. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you, Megan. And to take on the second part of the question, which is if we're planning on carrying out another RCT, not at this point or not in the near future, because as you've seen with at least hopefully with this presentation and with some of your experiences, it takes a tremendous amount of resources to carry out a study this way. But the intent is to do that, is to be able to hit pause, invest time, resources, find partners who are as committed as we are, run it, and then we know that we've evaluated the impact of our program, and what we plan on doing going forward is to continue monitoring it and making sure that it is sustainable, that the impact we've seen is sustained, rather than running an RCT next year, let's say. But may certainly happen again in the future when we feel that it's time to get one off the ground again. I think Natalie had also asked a great question saying, if storytelling for leadership participants are 67% more likely to speak up, but data shows that there wasn't a significant increase in their earnings, how do we, in the earnings, especially of younger women, how can we economically empower them? And thanks, Megan, for answering it. I just sort of wanted to highlight it for everyone. This really was one of our big learnings, and Claire touched upon it a bit earlier when she shared about our way forward. We knew that this confidence gap was definitely affecting younger women more, but now we're realizing the importance of adding those soft skills trainings in combination with storytelling for leadership. So now they feel confident, they have this mindset shift where they feel more in control of their life. But now they know how to set goals. They know how to find individuals in their communities who can help them with their goals. They learn how to prioritize them. Like we have a series, when we did the RCT, we focused only on 3 soft skills programs, modules, the goal setting, effective communication, and networking through seeking out opportunities. But we have a lot more that we can now start customizing depending on the group we're working with and what their needs are. Let me make sure I didn't miss any other question. We're doing all right with time. We said we'd end at 4:15, but also said we were more than happy to stay on the line if there were more questions. I think we may have addressed them all, but please feel free to flag it. Oh, I do see one. Christine, thank you so much for following up on the question you had asked earlier. You had asked if we had a plan for the women under the control group, and you clarified it by asking if we plan on continuing to work with these women. And the short answer is no, we will not continue working with the women who went through that group specifically. Instead, what we're doing is now partnering with Care Rwanda, and as our partner, they identify, now that they've seen the impact of our work, they understand how we can complement the programs that they're already running. They're the ones who are better positioned to know where they would want to continue integrating our programs. And as Rachel mentioned earlier, we've already started doing that. Since we concluded the RCT, we've trained a little over 200 women who are in the care program. And we hope to continue doing that and integrating our programs further. And one exciting step, I think, for us, especially now that we're armed with these RCT results, is that we're able to, as resonates, our trainers are able to go to a partner organization and deliver the training to their participants or their beneficiaries. But we also have a training of trainers model that we call a training of facilitators program, where we can train and certify the staff members of the facilitators of the partner organization, certify them in storytelling for leadership, let's say, as a content, and they can now deliver it themselves as part of their program, and they know the impact that they will be able to have through their RCT results that we have, and they know how they can amplify the impact of their own programming without Resonate being physically present. We're able to do that remotely now. We've been able to train facilitators. One of our partner organizations in Arusha, in Tanzania, they're able to do the training and deliver storytelling for leadership without us physically being there training their beneficiaries, which is definitely very, very exciting for us. I think if does anyone else have a question or a comment they'd like to share, then you can either raise your hand or drop it in the chat box. And if not, bear with me 1 second. It seems we may have addressed all of the questions we had. Thank you, Ingrid. I'm glad to hear that this was informative. We are really coming to the end of the hour and a half, which we've gone a bit over, and thank you for staying with us until the end. I really, really hope that you found the session informative and helpful, and that the learnings were interesting to you, because we definitely have come a long way in our approach to how to think about and how to measure personal transformation and increase in self-confidence. We're still learning, but we're certainly very proud of this milestone because it was important to us, and we were very glad to achieve it with very committed partners. And on behalf of the Resonate team, I would like to extend my sincere thank you to CARE Rwanda for their excellent collaboration and partnership. I would like to thank Megan, Kathy, and Ed, and your respective institutions for driving the study and funding it, because you were true thought partners and you were committed really to this effort every step of the way. And last but not least, I would like to thank the Resonate team, from the trainers to the enumerators and the MNE team that did an incredible work to implement it and get us to this date. If you are interested in learning more about storytelling for leadership, our soft skills programs, how to partner with us, or the RCT, there will be a pop-up survey at the end of this webinar when we close it. It's very short. Write your name and email address, and we'll be sure to follow up with you and reach out and start a conversation. And we'll also share the RCT results, the final report that summarizes, that includes a lot of what Megan has covered, but also some of the results and findings that she didn't have a chance to cover. And with all that said, I will thank you all for taking the time to join us. Take care, stay safe. Turi kumwe. Bye-bye. Yes, Silas, we will make sure you get the final detailed report. Thank you for coming and joining us. It's such a pleasure. Thank you, Delphine. Thank you for coming. All right, we shall end the webinar. Thank you.